Hello, Year 11s. In this screencast, we're going to be looking at Symbolism in the text Night by Elie Wiesel. Our learning intention is to understand the purpose of symbolism and to identify symbols and their meaning within the text Night. To be successful in this activity, you need to be able to define symbolism in your own words. You understand the analysis of the symbols that we discuss throughout this, and you can add additional information to the analysis. You also need to be able to analyse an additional symbol other than those discussed throughout this screencast. So the purpose of this screencast is to be able to answer these 4 questions for you. How do I identify a symbol? What is a symbol? How does Wiesel use symbolism? And what do I need to consider when analysing a symbol? So first up, how do I identify symbolism? So I'm going to ask you to consider this question. If you were asked to draw 6 to 10 objects, people, or actions that you think are important in the story, what would you draw? So if you couldn't tell anyone what this text is about and you just had to draw 6 to 10 objects, people, or actions, what would these be? So please pause this video while you draw these for me. Okay, so firstly, night. You might have made the connection that night is not only the title of the text, but it is referenced continuously throughout. Eyes. This symbol is a little less obvious, so don't be discouraged if you did not choose to draw it. And fire. You might have also drawn flames or smoke. You may have also drawn a corpse, some form of silence, seasons, or barbed wire. So I just want to touch on silence. It's a little bit of a tricky one. Not every mention of silence is symbolic. Therefore, you have to decipher where silence is representing a bigger idea. So for example, where Mrs. Shawster screams for the first time, it is said a piercing cry broke the silence. And it's not until she is forced to sit down that the silence fell again. So here, silence is symbolic of fear, inhumanity, and helplessness. Okay, so now let's look at what actually is a symbol. So I've put here 3 definitions of symbolism from 3 different sources. The purpose of this is to have a really good understanding of symbolism before I'm going to ask you to write your own definition. So firstly, symbolism is a technique used in literature when some things are not to be taken literally. The symbolism can be an object, person, situation, event, or action that has a deeper meaning and context. So this technique can enhance writing and gives insight to the reader. So it's supposed to give you, the reader, further understanding of what the character might be feeling or thinking. Secondly, a symbol is a literary device that contains several layers of meaning, and it's often concealed at first sight. So for example, the title of the text Night, if you didn't know what it was about, you might just think that it's about something that happens at night time. So a symbol is representative of several other aspects, concepts, or traits than those that are visible in a literal translation alone, so the dictionary definition. A symbol is using an object or action that means something more than its literal meaning. Symbols are objects that stand for more than just itself. They can even represent feelings or thoughts. So for example, being given flowers, the flowers can symbolize thanks or love. So now, using a knowledge of symbolism and the definitions provided, I'm going to ask you to consider how you would define symbolism and write a definition in your books. But first, I just want to revise what we went over. So symbolism can be an object, a person, a situation, event, or action that has a deeper meaning. They are not to be taken literally, contain several layers of meaning, often concealed at first sight, and they represent feelings or thoughts. So in short, a symbol is something concrete that represents an abstract idea. So for example, down here I have a heart, which equals love. So I'm saying this heart can symbolize love. So because love is an abstract idea, we need something concrete. So concrete things to symbolize love. So consider that if you're asked to draw love, what would you draw? More than likely, you would draw out this heart, as it's a universal symbol of what people associate with love. So if we consider an abstract idea from the text, so for example, suffering. Suffering is an abstract idea, and therefore if you were to draw suffering, you would need symbols to depict the idea of suffering. So similar when you're writing. So again, I'm going to ask you to pause this screencast while you write your own definition of symbolism. Okay, so once you've found something that you know is a symbol, what do you need to consider when analysing a symbol? Firstly, you want to look at the sentence structure of where the symbol is placed. So a short, simple sentence aims to create tension or urgency, whereas a more complex sentence are read slower, so they don't have that sense of urgency about them. So consider the sentence where the symbol is placed, and I'll give an example of this later on. So the events that occur before and after, so consider the context of where the symbol is placed, so what events are occurring. Any literary techniques used, so for example, Wiesel uses a lot of repetition to reinforce particular ideas. So you might want to ask yourself things like, is the symbol repeated? Why might it be repeated? And is the symbolic meaning always the same, or does it change throughout the course of the text? So you need to come to a conclusion after that of what ideas, feelings, or thoughts the author is trying to represent. So here I just want you to remember that there may be several layers of meaning in one word. So it's a skill to peel back the layers to reveal a deeper meaning. So it is going to take practice, so don't stress if you don't feel like you're grasping this straight away. Okay, so here is a table I'd like you to draw up in your books. As we go through each symbol, I'd like you to just keep a record of what we discuss. So first, the symbol that we're talking about, so I've got knight. Secondly, the quote that we're looking at and the page number, and the context of where the quote falls and the significance of the symbol. And then at the end of each symbol that we talk about, I'm going to just do a 1 to 2 sentences about what the meaning of the symbol is. So you might want to pause again as you draw that up in your books. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at how Wiesel uses symbolism throughout his text. So the first use of symbolism you'll come across in the title of the text, which is knight. So a question you might want to ask yourself after reading the text is, why did he choose that title? So firstly, we're going to have a look at the dictionary definition of knight, because I find sometimes this gives me a little bit of hint about what the symbolism could be. So dictionary definition, the literal meaning, the period from sunset to sunrise in each 24 hours. It doesn't really give me very much, but I just want you to have a little bit of think about, if you saw a book called Knight, you would most likely, if you didn't know the symbolism behind the word, you would just think it's a book about nighttime, which obviously doesn't sound very exciting. But after reading the text and analysing the symbolism, you should feel that you have a little bit more insight into Wiesel's feelings and experiences. So that's why I feel it's really important that you answer that question. Why did he choose this title? Why do you think he chose this title? So I've just got a little bit of an extract that I'm going to read to you. I met him in 1941. I was almost 13 and deeply observant. By day, I studied the Talmud, and by night, I would run to the synagogue to weep over the destruction of the temple. So I don't know why I did this, I can't remember, but I looked up the symbolism of night in the Talmud. And it said that night has a negative association. It is a time of fear and danger, a symbol of death and the return of chaos. So I thought that was quite interesting, because I think that kind of reflects the symbolism that Wiesel's put of night throughout his text. So that's something to consider as we move forward in this symbol. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at a number of passages from the text where night is evident. So first, on page 12, night fell. So a little bit of context of what is occurring. This is when the Jews were living in the ghetto. The optimism was rising, and most people thought that they would remain in the ghetto until the end of the war. So Wiesel begins this paragraph here through quite positive imagery, so we can feel the optimism as we're reading. So a sunny spring day, people strolled seemingly carefree through the crowded street. They exchanged cheerful greetings, children played games, rolling hazelnuts on the sidewalk. So new paragraph, where is the focus of our analysis, is night fell. So a very simple sentence. And remember I said before, simple sentences can carry a sense of tension. So night fell, some 20 people had gathered in our courtyard. My father was sharing some anecdotes and holding forth on his opinion of the situation. He was a good storyteller. Then it increases, so the tension increases. Suddenly the gate opened. So if you consider the events that occur before and after the use of night, so night fell, quite positive, optimistic up here, and then all of a sudden this short simple sentence shows that there's tension starting to rise. So we've got the immediacy of suddenly the gate opened, the growing darkness, which I've underlined there because I think that in itself is quite powerful. If you consider growing to be the growth of something, obviously, an increase, and what the darkness could symbolize. So remember that darkness is often associated with night. So these two words you'll find build on each other throughout the text to create a deeper meaning. And it even gives a possible insight into Wiesel's views and values. So as well, down the bottom here, the story he had interrupted will remain unfinished. So it's quite final how he finishes that passage off there. So thinking about all this, you can see down the bottom I've given my final analysis of what I think night symbolizes in this passage. So I think in this instance, night symbolizes the delusion of safety. As night falls here, the delusion begins to be stripped away. So as I said, they're quite optimistic up here, and then when after night falls, things start to go downhill. Okay, so next on page 17, night had fallen. So you can see here that it's quite repetitive of night fell. However, night having fallen, so saying night had fallen, indicates that the delusion of safety has well and truly been stripped away. So night had fallen. So first, again, a little bit of context. The ghettos were to be liquidated and everyone was to pack a backpack. So when Wiesel describes them marching away, he describes them to be defeated and compares them to beaten dogs. So in this passage, we can see the violence increasing through the reference to incidents of, harsh blows here. So harsh blows. And again, comparing people to animals as they were herded along. So herded through the main synagogue. So therefore, the repetition of night had fallen reiterates that the delusion referenced on page 12 is no longer present as the reality has hit. So as well, there is a significance down there of it was to be the last night spent in our house. As you read through, you will realize that there are many last nights that he experiences, and he even highlights this at one point. So this is the beginning point of many last nights. So down the bottom there, I have written, in this instance, night symbolizes the loss of delusion. So it's not exactly the same as the last reference to night, as it was the delusion being stripped away. The loss of delusion is gone, and the beginning of uncertainty and chaos. Okay, so here is an example of symbolism where dark and night are used together to represent an idea. So the building up of the symbolism of night is becoming more intense with each reference. So by this point, the reader is able to more easily infer meaning through the symbolism of night. So we're looking on page 24. There was nothing, only the darkness of night. So first, the context of what's occurring. They're on a cattle car at this point on the way to an unknown destination. There is a shift in the attitude from surely it can't get any worse to all of a sudden saving the small portion of food received as tomorrow could be worse. So there is no escaping. They are sealed in the cattle car, and if anyone goes missing, they'll be shot like dogs. So if you consider some of the other lines throughout this passage, you'll find the symbolism of the darkness of night to hold a more powerful meaning. So firstly, her cry broke the silence, so a piercing cry broke the silence. So that's Mrs. Shorster's cry. So think about what the silence could represent. As I was saying in a couple of slides earlier, was it the quiet they needed in order to sleep, or does the silence represent things that they don't want to admit to each other? So things that they cannot say aloud, and the fear of the unknown, because remember, they don't know where they're going at this point. So all of a sudden this cry has woken them up to the reality of these events. So when you consider the hidden meaning in the lines, some pressed against the bars to see, but there was nothing, only the darkness of night. So you may interpret this as a harsh reminder that they are going into the unknown and that they can look but they won't see. So there is nothing in front of them and no one to help them. So it's just a harsh reminder. So in the next line, the cry is described as a harsh awakening. So here, the harsh awakening. But it is the awakening from their sleep that we're thinking about. So is it the awakening of their sleep or the awakening to the reality of the situation? So there's some things that we need to think about. So in this instance down the bottom here, I've said night symbolizes the hopelessness of their situation and also the fear of the unknown. So Wiesel's symbolism of night provides us with more insight into the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of those who witnessed the Holocaust. So night is so much more than the dictionary definition, as I said, the period from sunset to sunrise in each 24 hours. So after we gain meaning of what the symbolism of night is, we can make the connection that night symbolizes all that was lost in this dark period. So the suffering, the hopelessness, the loss of innocence, childhood and faith, and the loss of millions of lives. So to Wiesel, night is a world without God, and never shall he forget. So on this page here, I have a number of references to where you can find night throughout the text. So I've bolded the ones that we've used. At the end of this screencast, I'm going to ask you to pick one of these other quotes, and I'm going to ask you to find it in the text and complete the context and what you think it symbolizes at that point in time. Okay, so let's look at some other symbols that are present throughout the text. So eyes. So again, it's important to look at the literal meaning of the words, the dictionary definition, as this may give you some guidance. So this is the definition of the word eyes, but I picked the verb rather than the noun. So to look at closely or with interest. And some synonyms are look at, see, observe, view, gaze at, gaze upon, stare at, scan, regard, or contemplate. I've also got the universal symbol here. So if I haven't said already, the universal symbol is a word or object that most everyone agrees on the meaning. So the universal symbol of eyes is the window, the eye is the window to the soul. So you might have heard that before. So we're going to have a look at how Moishe the beetle is described through his eyes, or how his eyes are described throughout the text by Wiesel. So Moishe the beetle is the first person introduced, so this should indicate to you that there is some importance in what he adds to the story. So he is introduced, a bit of context, he is introduced as a poor man, but his presence bothered no one, even though the townspeople did not like to help the needy. However, he is said to have made people smile. So on the very first page, Eliezer says he likes Moishe for his wide, dreamy eyes, gazing off into the distance. So if we consider the universal symbol, the eyes are the window to the soul, Wiesel's description of Moishe's eyes denotes an innocence and pleasant quality with heavenly wisdom. Apologies for my pronunciation. However, after Moishe is expelled on page 6, he soon returns with stories of what he had seen. These horrific experiences where he witnesses infants being used as targets results in his eyes having lost their dreaminess and are hollow. So you can see there the joy in his eyes was lost. So Wiesel describes Moishe to no longer be the same. The joy in his eyes was gone. So we can see there that the misery and despair has damaged his soul if we're thinking about eyes to be a symbolism of someone's soul. So down the bottom here I've said Wiesel uses eyes to symbolize the person's state of mind. So initially Moishe is a dreamer and mysterious. After witnessing unimaginable events, the misery and despair has damaged his soul. So again, here I put some references to eyes that I'm going to ask you to refer back to later to grab one of those and analyze the symbolic meaning of eyes in that particular passage or quote. Okay, so let's have a look at one more before I ask you to analyze the symbol yourself. So fire. I've provided you with the definitions, but you do not they don't really help us with much or give us much insight into the meaning behind this symbol. So the noun, a process in which a substance combines chemically with oxygen from the air and typically gives out bright light, or the verb, discharge a gun. So as you can see, neither of them are really that helpful to what the symbolic meaning may be. But in saying that, the universal symbol is fire can represent anger, passion, love, pain, or death. And it is a symbol used in some cases for rebirth or renewal of life. Okay, so let's look back at a passage we've already analysed on page 24. We looked at the symbolism of night within this passage, the darkness of night, but now we're going to look at fire. I see fire, and look at the fire, this terrible fire. So this is the moment that Mrs. Shawstar cries that she sees fire when they are in the cattle car. At this point, her cries could be seen to foreshadow, so hint at the events to come, so a warning to the people. Since fire could symbolise fate, death, and the hell to come. So the reader senses, I've written down here, the reader senses the symbolism of these cries, and the tension rises for us as we feel something bad is going to happen. So here I've got some references to fire and flames. There's more references to flames throughout the text rather than fire, so have a look at both of them. So there's two there for you to have a look at. Okay, so now it's your turn. So I have a symbolism activity set up for you. So what you need to do first is to select one of the symbols that we've already discussed and analyse one of the passages provided. So I would like you to do all three, but to get started, just select one of the symbols and analyse one of the passages provided. The passages are provided on the slides after each symbol where I've put the page numbers and quotes. So after you've picked one of the quotes or passages that you want to analyse, you need to consider the following for your analysis. So the structure, the sentence structure of where that symbol is placed, if that has any significance into how it's interpreted by the reader, the context of the events that occur before and after, any literary devices that are used to complement that, and what is the idea, feeling, or thought represented. So then you need to complete this activity again. However, you need to choose a symbol that you feel has significance or a different one. So for example, the ones that I popped up on the second slide. So a corpse, silence, seasons, and barbed wire. So I'm going to leave it to you to find the page numbers and quotes to analyse those symbols. So this activity will be available on Simon and on your Google Classroom with a little bit more detail and the page numbers and quotes available for you. Enjoy!